being outlaws is in our DNA. That's what it is to be American. We're always the rebel opposition. We're always outnumbered. We're always hated. We're also feared and respected. I wouldn't have things any other way. I'm having a good time.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
All right, gentlemen, welcome back to the Greene Tavern. Tonight we have our Christmas special episode, joined by a special guest, NathanaelGreeneSociety member, Mr. Hazard's Ghost, and our co-host, Kevin, as always. Mr. Hazard's Ghost, how's it going?
Good. How about you? Thanks for having me, guys.
Fantastic. So, tonight, well, granted, this is a pre-recording, but when this is going live, Christmas Eve, the day before George Washington's surprise attack across the Delaware River, starting the Battle of Trenton, that by many accounts saved the American Revolution and its infancy. So I'm going to read off an account, a brief overview of the battle. We're going to get into a a little bit of discussion about the Battle of Trenton, the miracle of the Delaware crossing, as well as what it means to be an American, what it meant to those men and to us today, sort of in light of some recent events. So, getting into the battle on the night of Christmas Day, December 25th, 1776, as the Continental cause was sort of waning, um, General George Washington, led approximately 2,400 Continental Army soldiers across the ice-choked Delaware River in a daring surprise attack on Hessian forces stationed at Trenton, New Jersey, seizing the initiative and bringing the Revolutionary War back into the Patriots' favor. Facing brutal winter storms, the troops used sturdy Durham boats to ferry men, horses, and artillery from Pennsylvania across the river to New Jersey, completing the treacherous crossing by early morning despite a series of delays. The password that day was victory or death. The Americans marched onto Trenton, swiftly defeated the Hessians, capturing over 900 prisoners with near to minimal losses on their end. Gentlemen, Battle of Trenton.
Yeah, I think that it's one of my favorite battles in the Revolutionary War. You had the three columns going into the assault there on Trenton. It's just a really brilliant raid.
Yeah, certainly. The sheer surprise of the attack, you have these German mercenaries hired on by the British, just
Yep.
stationed in the town of Trenton, asleep, drunken into a stupor from the Christmas celebrations. You have this audacious raid, um, propagated by the Continental Army across the river, completely seize the initiative, swing the war back completely into their favor. It was great. Kevin, you had an excerpt from the Nathanael Greene biography you wanted to read regarding the crossing itself. You want to get into that?
Yeah, give me a moment to pull this up. So this is a little excerpt from the Nathanael Greene biography. Washington had planned to have all of his men across by midnight, but conditions made the crossing painfully slow. Colonel Glover's regiment of Marblehead fishermen pulled and steered the frightened boats across the current, battling their way through big floes of ice that chunked heavily against their sides. Washington, wrapped in a cloak, went over around 7 p.m. to view the landing parties. Knox recalled Washington stepping over men in the boat till he reached the bench where Knox sat. He nudged Knox with his boot and said, "Shift that fat ass, Harry, but slowly, or you'll swamp the damned boat." That was just a little excerpt of the conversation that went on.
Yeah, so for a little historical context. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, great getting an insight into the man of George Washington. It is, some things don't change. Soldiers are soldiers. That type of jibing's not changed.
Maybe a little more colorful nowadays.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, so for a little bit of historical context around the battle, 1776 had not been a great year for the Patriot cause. Obviously, we declared independence that year, but later in the summer and going into the fall, we'd suffered a string of defeats in and around New York. We lost at Long Island. Then New York itself fell. Fort Washington fell. Fort Lee. The Army was in tatters by this point, dropped down from around 20,000 to fewer than 5,000 men at the end of 1776. A lot of these soldiers were on 3-month and 1-year enlistments, and every year towards this point in the year, the Army had to rebuild. So it's very, very ill-equipped, few in numbers. The British have the initiative. General Howe is pursuing the Americans across New Jersey into Pennsylvania. So morale was basically just in the toilet. And to make things worse, on New Year's Eve, most of the rest of the soldiers had their enlistment set to expire. So it was really all or nothing for General Washington. Congress was putting a ton of pressure onto the army to make a decisive action. Thomas Paine actually published a pamphlet on the 19th of December, The American Crisis, where he's quoted as saying, these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. So things were not looking good. But General Washington came up with a plan to turn it all around. And it really kind of shows the character of, the American soldier, the American patriot, really at its best. Backs against the wall. It's all or nothing. You really have to go all in to defeat the enemy, and that's what really defines an American soldier, an American patriot.
Absolutely.
And that's what it means to be an American. Truly, these were the men. They were colonials. They were patriots. English stock, whatever. They banded together against the English crown, and they fought the war to create this nation, right? Their heritage is what made them American. That's what makes us American. Our line, our lineage that we can draw back to them, our shared heritage, 250 years in counting. Sort of in contrast to what we've been seeing over the last few days, the creedal nation hypothesis that's seeping into the so-called conservative zeitgeist. Tell that to any of the men who crossed the Delaware with General Washington.
For sure. Yeah, I always just go back to how it must have been for the individual Joe soldier there on the ground. It's they're probably 5 days or 6 days until their enlistment's up. They don't want to be doing anything, and there probably was a fair bit of grumbling, I imagine, having to infill 12 miles after you cross the Delaware to get to Trenton. It's many of them didn't have shoes, many of them didn't have socks, through the frozen ground there. It's just a really remarkable feat.
Yeah, they crossed a roughly 300 to 400 yard wide frozen river, marched 12 miles, and then fought a battle.
Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is really emblematic of the American soldier, throughout history, being able to just go through the worst conditions and just keep on fighting. And that's something worth fighting for, truly.
Yeah. It's also the first of a long train of us surprising Germans on Christmas, as far as battles go. Not really too much of a pattern, just, weird that it happened twice.
Right. So, Mr. Hazard, would you like to get into a little bit more on the battle plan itself for the Battle of Trenton?
Yeah. So I think that there's 3 main columns that came up. One was led by Washington, one was led by Nathanael Greene, one was led by Sullivan. I believe Sullivan's column kind of made first contact. And then as they move forward into the town, there's a short but brief sort of a urban environment fight there as they took the town, and then eventually but the Germans surrendered pretty quickly after that. I think when the actual German officer there was excuse me, he came out and offered his sword there to the Americans.
Yeah, the Germans had partied a little hard the previous day, and
yes.
they managed to get out of their quarters and muster, but their officers were shot up pretty quickly. One of their commanding officers, Colonel Rahl, was shot trying to put a defense together. We ended up capturing almost 900 Hessians, including quite a few of their officers. And I was doing some reading the other day, sort of ancillary to
They also
this.
took, I believe, as well.
Yes, yeah.
With all their arms.
In the British Parliament, this battle actually soured them quite a bit on the Hessian mercenaries. The Whigs sort of took that as a sort of political tool against the Tories. Like saying, "Why are we employing all these Germans if they're just gonna lose?" And then after that, they, for the most part, were just garrisoning like New York and in other places throughout the war.
For sure.
Yeah, in this battle, I feel like when people talk about the Revolution, the crossing of the Delaware it's mentioned, but it's not really given the significance that it deserves. This really was like if you can put a turning point on the map, this was probably it. You know, if Washington,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, if Washington did not cross when he did, it was over. It was so over.
I think Washington was a strategically brilliant general. There's debate about whether or not he was a tactically brilliant general. But I think the one thing that he did realize was that the soul of the nation at the time, the nation was the army in many respects. And so keeping the army alive, that was the center of gravity for the conflict. So long as the U.S. could field or put an army in the field, that we would still have a nation. And I think he realized that, and he knew that we needed to get a win in order to, get guys to re-enlist and so that he would have that army. That if we lost the battle or if we lost the army, we would lose the nation. That would be it.
Absolutely, and that's a message that should resonate with heritage Americans today.
Sure.
We operate best when our backs are against the wall. It's a pretty similar situation that we're in right now. Things don't look too great politically, whatever, for the sake of the country. But,
For sure.
When your back's against the wall as an American, it's your time to shine. Going all or nothing is what we do. That's what General Washington did. It's what we can do going forward.
And then the Trenton also enabled us to Princeton. I don't believe gets as much credit either. Princeton was another good victory against the British forces there. We secured that victory. The British were actually able to form up in their line of battle, in Washington at the heat of the moment, like rode between the lines to rally the men, and they were able to win the day there. I'm not quite as familiar on the particulars of that one, but I do remember that story as well. I think those two battles in tandem really solidified the army continuing throughout the winter, and then the 1777 as well.
Yeah, in 1777, continued to prove to be a pretty important year for us. Obviously, we won at Saratoga, and that brought the French into the war and really kept the cause together. All of that was, enabled by this particular victory at Trenton.
Yep, for sure.
So I guess, building off of the Battle of Trenton, the crossing of the Delaware, the epic painting, it's memorialized into American history. Whenever people think of the Revolutionary War, they probably conjure up that painting.
For sure.
What does it mean to be an American? It means you have a shared heritage, a bloodline, a history here, a shared culture. An American is what you are. It's what your parents were. It's what your family's been. It's a history, truly. Same thing with being a North Carolinian. Compare that all to a certain scammer's speech the other night at a festival.
Indeed.
No, none of them were in this picture. I don't see a single Vivek in this painting. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there isn't any. I think that there's definitely you have to have that heritage, it has to resonate with you. It has to connect with you. Like, have you given blood for this nation? You know, like, I know, like, for my own account, like, every generation of my family going back to King Philip's War has fought for this nation. And that means something, you know, like when your blood gets in the ground like that.
Absolutely. You wouldn't have to ask anyone in this painting, you know, are you an American? I mean, that question would just be silly to them, especially by this point in the
Exactly.
war. You know, we had fully declared our independence, severed our ties from
Yep.
Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, take any other famous painting from any point in our history. You know, are you an American? The
Yeah.
charge at Gettysburg or whatever the case may be. The question is just irrelevant because everyone knows. Like, of course I am. I am. My
Yeah.
father was. My grandfather was. Why do you ask that? And then you look, you know, 2025. We've got mass demographic change. People with no connection to this nation. To them, the Revolutionary War is just something in the textbook or on a YouTube video. It doesn't mean anything to them,
Yep.
except when it's time for them to put on a fake LARP like they do with the Civil War to dunk on Southerners, which is just code for
Exactly.
real Americans.
Yep.
You know, our history is our history. It's something that we should cherish. So are our holidays, for that matter. Christmas.
Indeed. Yeah.
This will be the second year in a row where a certain scammer has had a Christmas crash out. Maybe that's going to be a yearly tradition going forward. We have to look forward to. But
You know, Christmas in many ways is as much a patriotic holiday as it is a religious holiday in this country.
absolutely, yeah, and especially in North Carolina, because a lot of the Christmas imagery and whatnot comes from this state. You know, the state is the
Yeah.
number one Christmas tree producer in the United States, among other things. Christmas is just second nature to us. It's what we do. Obviously,
Indeed.
we're celebrating the birth of our Savior, but like you're saying, it's a uniquely American expression as we do
Yeah.
so.
There's a pretty decent sized German population going back to the War for Independence that was celebrating Christmas even back then, around the time of the Revolution. You know, you had a lot of people in Massachusetts and stuff where the Congregationalists weren't quite as keen on those types of celebrations, but here in North Carolina, we were doing that even pretty early on, prior to like the Victorian era, where it really gets popularized.
Yeah. So, you know, it's Christmas Eve. Tomorrow will be Christmas Day for everyone listening to the stream. It's probably a good day. Obviously, go to church, celebrate the birth of our Savior, but do a little reflection on what it means to be an American, what Christmas means as Americans, what it meant to those men crossing the Delaware, fighting at Trenton, keeping the cause alive, and ultimately winning independence for this great nation that they've passed on to you. And you know what you can do to defend that against a foreign horde that would seek to just completely undo everything that your ancestors fought for.
Indeed.
Mr. Kevin, do you have anything to add on to that?
No, sir. You said it very well. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got nothing else to add to that.
All right. Well, gentlemen, it's a short episode tonight. Very brief Christmas message for you all. Watch the stream, celebrate with your families, go to church tonight, go to church tomorrow, celebrate the birth of your Savior. Gather around the Christmas tree, celebrate, be festive. It's a time for Americans, time for Christians, and it's a time to be with your families, be with God. So, gentlemen, thank you both for coming on tonight. Thank you all for watching the Nathanael Green Society Christmas special. God bless you all, and good night.
Good night.
Merry Christmas, Patriots.
Merry Christmas, everyone.